All right, man, peace. So, brothers, this is going to be the aftermath video for the phenomenal welterweight championship showdown that occurred last night at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas, Nevada, between Manny Pacquiao and Keith one-time Thurman. And I have to say this about Manny, government name Emmanuel Dapadron Pacquiao. Yes, I'm going to use his government name because that was one of the most phenomenal performances of his career, especially at this stage of his career, being 40 years old. His footwork was phenomenal. His punch placement was phenomenal. His hand speed was phenomenal. His toughness was phenomenal. His punch resistance was phenomenal. That was one of the great performances of his career, and I give him a lot of credit for it because it was very clear, very obvious that Keith Thurman was in very good shape. Despite the reports, you can tell when a fighter's in great shape because even though Keith Thurman was bleeding from his nose and throughout the majority of the latter portion of the fight, he had to breathe through his mouth, he never showed that he was tired, per se. And you could tell when a fighter's tired. He was able to keep up with Pacquiao's pace for the most part, even though Pacquiao, of course, seemed to be in better condition than Keith, and his foot movement was far greater than Keith's. Keith still showed that he was in very good shape and good condition. So I have to give Emmanuel Dapadron Pacquiao the credit that he deserves. He started out from round one, showing that not only was he not scared of Keith, but he was going to be able to set traps for Keith that, to be honest with you, Keith should not have fell for. That combination that knocked him down in the first round is a combination that Manny has used numerous times. Normally a 4 or 5 punch combo where he ends with a right jab to the head. He'll set it up with 2 punches, then a left hand to the body, right hand upstairs to the head. He knocked down Miguel Cotto with that same combination. He's been using that for many years. Keith, for whatever reason, when he moved back, he was moving back in a straight line, which he was not supposed to do. And on top of that, when he was moving back in that straight line, he had his hands down. So he was very irresponsible defensively from round one. I thought that he started to pick it up in the mid portion of the fight. Let me say this. There's been a bit of controversy or alleged controversy about the scorecards. I do agree with the judges that had it 115 to 112. I watched the fight twice. The first time that I watched it, I thought that Manny won about 9 rounds. Of course, giving 3 rounds to Keith. The second time that I watched it, I said, no, Keith won about 5 rounds. It was a very competitive, close fight, especially in the mid portion of the fight. I gave rounds 3, 6, 7, 9, and 11 to Keith Thurman. And had he fought a smarter fight, maybe he could have gotten the victory. It is what it is. It's something for him to learn from. There's no doubt about that. But he certainly got outboxed, outsmarted, and just outconditioned throughout the entire fight. And once again, I thought that Keith was in very good condition. But Pacquiao was in incredible condition for his age. Let me say this also. There were some brothers who commented in my preview video about how there was no VADA testing for the fight. I didn't bring it up even though I knew about that. I didn't bring it up because, to be quite honest with you, if there was no VADA testing before the fight, that means that Keith didn't press for it either. Which makes me assume that if the Keith Thurman team did not enforce VADA testing, that he must have been on something as well. Maybe they both won something and they just had a gentleman's agreement that they were going to enter the ring, whoever was on what, it didn't matter. But for there to be no VADA testing, that tells me that both fighters had to have some type of under-the-table deal that if they were going to use something, a performance-enhancing drug or what have you, nobody was going to care. But I guarantee you this, in the rematch, should there be a rematch, Keith Thurman and his team are going to implore Al Haymon and the Boxing Commission to make sure that there is VADA testing for the fight. Because you cannot go into the ring against Manny Pacquiao and give him any presumed advantages, assuming that he was on some type of performance-enhancing drug. I'm not saying that he was, but for there to be no VADA testing, that tells me that they were not concerned about that, and that's not the way to go in a high-stakes match like this. Now, I also saw some interviews with Adrian Broner in which he stated that Keith Thurman was out gambling with him in the casinos, I believe he said on Wednesday and Thursday night during fight week. And Broner claims that he actually cursed out Thurman and his team and embarrassed them into leaving the casino. How true that story is, I'm not quite sure. But why would Broner state that unless it were true? And he stated it on camera. And we know that Broner has a bit of an axe to grind with Keith because Keith tried to use Adrian Broner as an example of what he was not going to be during his fight with Pacquiao. And I think that in the rematch, once again, should the next fight of Manny Pacquiao's career be a rematch against Keith Thurman, that Keith will actually take some of what Adrian Broner did in his fight against Pacquiao and try to adapt it to a rematch, because he certainly was not as defensive as he should have been. And it's also obvious that due to the fact that he bet on himself to score a knockout over Manny Pacquiao in the first round, that it caused him to be overly reckless against Pacquiao. That was a major mistake that led to his knockdown and eventually led to his loss in the fight. Once again, I agree with the judges' scorecards, at least the two judges who scored at 115, 112 for Manny Pacquiao. That was about right. There were some tenuous moments in that fight for Pacquiao that had Keith maybe been in better mental condition. And I say mental condition because it's very clear to me that he was foggy-headed during the latter portion of the fight, because even in the post-fight press conference, he said that he thought the fight went by so fast. I said to myself, it's not that the fight went by that fast, it's that Pacquiao was hitting you upside your head so damn much, you can't remember certain portions of the fight. Keith had him hurt, I think, in round 9 and round 11. And as we know, Pacquiao definitely had him hurt in round 10. He also hit him with a great body shot in round 4 early in the round. It was a right hand to Keith's left side of his rib cage that buckled him. And then, of course, he hit him with that perfect liver shot in the 10th round that had Keith running all around the ring. And to be honest with you, Keith was almost ready to quit. That body shot almost made him quit because he spit out his mouthpiece. Whenever you see these guys spit out their mouthpiece, they're almost ready to quit. And let me say this also. Al Heyman, Floyd Mayweather, the PBC, they have to improve their commentating team. That commentating team of Lennox Lewis and Joe Goosen and whoever the main commentator is, they're just not up to snuff. Joe Goosen especially, he's terrible. The dude claimed that it may have been a headbutt that Manny Pacquiao hit Keith Thurman with when Thurman bent over forward and started running around the ring. It was obviously a body shot. Who the hell starts doing that off of a headbutt? Normally when a fighter gets hit with a headbutt, he snaps his head backward and he puts his glove on top of his head, or he taps his head with his glove to show the judges, the audience, and the commentators, and even his corner, that he got hit with a headbutt. Keith Thurman doubled over and started to run away. It was very obvious that he knew he was in big trouble. And had that been the Pacquiao of 10 years earlier who had fought Cotto, who knows? He probably would have got dropped again in that round. I'm not quite sure if he would have got stopped, but he definitely would have gotten dropped again in that round. But I definitely have to give credit to Emmanuel Dapedron, because as I've already stated, that was arguably the biggest victory of his welterweight career, that victory last night. When you look over the course of Manny's resume, his tenure at 147, many of his fights, they had some type of corollary on the fight to say, well, you have to fight me at a catch weight or something of that nature, fighting someone moving up from 140. Many of his fans got upset with me for bringing that up. It's just facts. When you look at Manny's resume at 147, a lot of the big fights that he's had, he made the fighters meet him at a catch weight with a rehydration clause. This was the first fight that he's had against a top-notch welterweight that he was able to defeat that welterweight, and there was no rehydration clause, there was no catch weight. So all the credit in the world to Manny Pacquiao. But once again, I promise you that should they rematch, Thurman is going to demand VADA testing. There's no doubt about it. Am I saying that Manny was juiced to the gills, or that he was being assisted by some type of EPO? Who knows? I will say that he looked extremely fresh. He was in great condition. There was no doubt about it. And his footwork was, it was ethereal. Especially, I think, in like the second round. His foot movement, he was just turning Thurman all over the place. Thurman fought a very stupid fight. Very stupid fight early. He started to fight smarter as the fight went along, but it was, once again, it was very clear that he thought he was just going to run through Pacquiao early. And I think that Thurman maybe could have gotten a knockdown early, possibly in the 3rd or 4th round, had he been more patient and utilized more real boxing skills. But Pacquiao has certainly re-entered his name into the welterweight lexicon as a top welterweight and not just a name attraction. He's not just a fighter who's going to be fighting fighters moving up from 140 and beating them. He's shown that he definitely can beat real welters. And he certainly proved me wrong. I had him losing a decision last night. So congratulations to Emmanuel Dapedron Pacquiao. So what's next for the both of these fighters? It's very clear that a major monkey wrench has been thrown into the timeline of most of these top welters due to Manny being victorious last night. Because presumably, Keith Thurman was going to win last night. Errol Spence wins in late September. And then maybe they meet next April for a mega welterweight championship bout. But now that we saw Keith take that L, it's very clear that he's going to be gunning for an immediate rematch. So the question is going to be, will Pacquiao give him that immediate rematch? Or will he still try for that mega bout with Floyd Mayweather, who was in attendance last night? It's very obvious why Floyd was in attendance last night. He wanted to see how Pacquiao looked. And I think that Floyd saw enough of what he needed to see to know that Pacquiao is still definitely a dynamic fighter. And if he were to choose to fight him, he's going to have to get in great condition. And by the way, when you watch Thurman last night, who's considered one of the top fighters in the world, it should make you have more respect for how phenomenal and how intelligent a boxer Floyd Mayweather is, how he was able to nullify so many of Pacquiao's attacks by not allowing his pride to seize the day. And that's the real frustration of many basic or quote-unquote casual boxing fans when it comes to Floyd Mayweather. He's never going to allow you to dictate to him how he's going to fight. He's not going to allow that. Sometimes you have to utilize your A game or your boxing basics to seize the day and allow you to get a victory against an opponent who might bring certain things to the table that if you allow that to entice you, you could end up getting your ass whooped or end up having the fight be far tougher than it needs to be. I've stated this in previous videos. There was a portion of Floyd's fight against Manny where he was in the corner and his pops was asking him, how come you don't go forward on Manny? Floyd said no. It was maybe after like the 5th or 6th round, something like that, or maybe earlier, maybe the 3rd round. And it was very clear that Floyd told his father no because he felt that power. And he realized that Manny Pacquiao was extremely crafty and tricky in how he set his punches up. And he did not want to get hit with something that he did not see. And that's what happened with Thurman last night, especially early when he got hit with that combo that knocked him down. I said, that's the same combo that Pacquiao knocked Miguel Cotto down with. And what's interesting is that Thurman fought a lot like Miguel Cotto fought Pacquiao in their fight. And it was a similar result. Of course, Thurman did not get knocked down as many times as Miguel Cotto did because he was not at a catch weight. There was no rehydration clause. He used his feet a bit more than Cotto used his feet back in 2009. And also Pacquiao was 10 years older. But he still got knocked down with that same combo. So it's very obvious that Manny's next fight is either going to be a rematch against Keith or he's going to try for that mega bout with Floyd Mayweather. I think that the Keith Thurman Errol Spence fight is most likely not going to happen unless Keith gets the immediate rematch with Manny. And then maybe that Errol Spence fight between Errol and Keith will happen late next year. But I saw a video of Errol leaving the stadium after the fight. He looked pissed off. Like the ass whooping that Manny gave Keith is what Errol wanted to give Keith. He wanted to hand Keith his first loss, his first defeat. And that was snatched out of his hands by Manny Pacquiao. Errol looked really pissed off. I also saw an interview last night with Mikey Garcia. And he stated that he spoke to Pacquiao before the fight and he asked Pacquiao why he was still fighting. And he states that Pacquiao responded to that question by stating that he still believes that he has something to prove and he still wants to amplify his legacy. And once again, he certainly did it last night by defeating Keith Thurman, a young welter who was relatively in his prime, at his full weight capacity, and he did his thing. So congratulations to Manny. And I think that Manny even understands that there are still some questions about certain portions of his career, especially during his tenure at welter. So he answered a lot of questions last night. I mean, if Manny, hypothetically speaking, were to defeat Thurman again in a rematch, and then shock the world by defeating Errol Spence, now we have to have another conversation about where Manny would rank overall. At least I would. As of right now, I have Manny top 10 all time. No doubt about it. Top 10 all time for his accomplishments. But if he were to defeat Keith Thurman in a rematch and then defeat Errol Spence, now we have to start talking about him, or I would have to start talking about him in that top 5 category and maybe pulling somebody out of that top 5. Because I will say this right now, and this is probably a video for another day. When you compare Manny Pacquiao to Muhammad Ali, which I think is the best comparison for him, he basically is a left-handed Muhammad Ali. The difference is that Manny Pacquiao was in great condition for all of his fights. Muhammad Ali was not in great condition for all of his fights. Right now, I will put Manny Pacquiao in that same area as Ali. I would have Ali above him because of certain things that Ali could do that Manny Pacquiao could not quite do as well. But Manny's conditioning and his focus on his craft is certainly above Ali's. I mean, whether or not you want to include the component about the performance-enhancing drugs. But as I've already stated, for Keith Thurman to not make a big deal about the VADA testing, I will have to wonder if he was on something as well. Keith certainly has to win the rematch. If an immediate rematch is made, he has to win it. If he loses 2 straight fights to Manny Pacquiao, now he gets knocked down a rung on the welterweight ladder, and he becomes a fighter who now has to search out Danny Garcia and other fighters like that to fight, and he might not even be the A side of a rematch with Danny Garcia, even though he beat him. So Keith has to win a rematch against Manny Pacquiao to get his name back up into that welterweight stratosphere. But we'll see what happens. Once again, congratulations to Emmanuel Dapadron Pacquiao. He certainly proved me wrong. Phenomenal performance, incredible performance, great feet, great footwork, great heart as usual. I thought that the final judgment that was rendered was a fair judgment. 115-112 sounded about right when I rescored the fight again the second time. And we'll see what happens after this. So peace.